Right now, in the driest places on Earth, engineers at MIT have built a device that pulls clean, drinkable water directly out of the air. No electricity, no pump, no filter, no moving parts of any kind. It's roughly the size of a window pane, and it was tested in Death Valley, one of the most brutal, bone-dry environments in North America, in conditions where every other passive water harvesting system on the planet simply gives up. So how does a sheet of gel and a pane of glass manage to succeed where entire industries of engineering have failed? And could this be the thing that finally solves water scarcity for the 2 billion people living without reliable access to clean drinking water? Let's get into it. To understand why this invention matters, you have to go back to the oldest problem humans have ever tried to solve. How do you get water in a place that doesn't have any? For thousands of years, that answer was rain harvesting. Ancient civilizations carved channels into stone to funnel rainfall into underground cisterns, capable of holding enormous reserves. And the Romans took that idea and built an empire's worth of aqueducts on top of it, moving water across hundreds of miles with nothing but gravity and stone. It was, for its time, one of the most sophisticated engineering achievements humanity had ever produced. But rain has always had one fatal flaw. It's unreliable exactly where you need it most. The drier the region, the less you can count on the sky to deliver, and the more catastrophic it becomes when a season passes without enough of it. So people got creative and started looking somewhere else for water, not up at the clouds, but into the air itself, the invisible reservoir hanging above every desert on the planet, whether the ground below it is wet or not. In the Andes, communities strung up fabric mesh to comb moisture out of rolling Pacific fog, catching droplets too fine to fall as rain and letting them collect into something usable. On the volcanic slopes of Lanzarote, farmers built stone rings that trapped overnight dew and drained it straight to the roots of their vines, essentially engineering a slow, silent irrigation system out of nothing but rock and temperature. These weren't primitive stopgaps either. Versions of them are still running today, refined but fundamentally unchanged. Morocco operates the largest fog harvesting network on the planet, pulling well over 1,000 gallons a day out of Atlantic fog for villages that would otherwise have none, using nothing but mesh netting and gravity. In Chile's Atacama Desert, one of the driest places on the planet, researchers have redesigned fog-catching mesh, adjusting the weave and the angle to boost yields several times over what the original nets could manage. And in parts of East Africa, tall bamboo towers now harvest fog, dew, and rain in the same structure, stacking 3 different water sources into a single piece of low-tech infrastructure. But every single one of those systems shares the exact same weakness. They need humidity to work. Fog and dew collectors depend on moisture already hanging in the air. And the moment that air dries out, production stops dead, no matter how well the mesh is engineered or how cleverly the stone is shaped. And that's the cruel irony of water scarcity. The places suffering the worst are almost always the places with the least humidity to harvest in the first place. A fog net is a brilliant piece of technology on a foggy coastline. In the middle of an actual desert is just a piece of mesh hanging in dry air, doing nothing. Engineers tried to force the issue with machines instead. Atmospheric water generators, essentially oversized dehumidifiers, chill the air below its dew point until moisture condenses out of it. The same basic principle as the drip pan under your air conditioner, just scaled up and pointed at drinking water. They work, and in humid conditions they can produce several gallons a day for a household. But they're power hungry, burning through roughly a kilowatt-hour of electricity for every quart of water they produce, which sounds small until you multiply it across a whole family's daily needs. And the regions that need this technology the most are usually the regions with the least reliable grid power to run it on. You end up with a solution that only works where the problem is already less severe. So, for decades, there's been a genuine gap in the market. A way to pull water from air that's actually dry in a place with no dependable electricity, without needing a power plant standing behind it. That's the gap MIT just closed. In the middle of last year, a team of engineers unveiled a passive harvester that looks almost unremarkable from the outside. A glass box about the size of a window, roughly 5.5 square feet. Nothing about the exterior suggests it's doing anything more advanced than sitting in the sun. But inside that box is where the real engineering lives. Suspended at the center is a sheet of specially engineered hydrogel, molded into a pattern of tiny domes, almost like bubble wrap. That texture isn't decorative. It massively increases the surface area of the gel, which means far more of it is in contact with the surrounding air at any given moment. And far more moisture can be pulled in per hour than a flat sheet of the same material ever could. The gel itself is loaded with lithium chloride, a salt that has an almost obsessive attraction to water vapor, so much so that it will actively pull moisture out of air most people would describe as bone dry. It's aggressive enough to strip moisture out of air sitting at just 10% humidity, a level so dry that fog nets and dew traps don't even register it as an opportunity worth chasing. But salt-based hydrogels have always had one nasty side effect that kept them out of practical use. The salt tends to leach into the water it collects, leaving you with something that isn't safe to drink without extra filtration, which defeats a lot of the point of a self-contained device. MIT's fix was to blend glycerol into the gel formula, a compound that locks the salt in place and keeps it from migrating into the finished water as it's released. The result, tested and confirmed in the field, is water clean enough to drink straight out of the device. No additional filtration required. Here's how the daily cycle actually runs, and it's worth walking through slowly because the whole design hinges on it. At night, temperatures drop and humidity ticks up just slightly, even in the desert, and the gel spends those cooler hours quietly absorbing whatever moisture is floating around it, swelling slightly as it takes on water. Then morning comes, the sun rises, and the gel starts to warm up. As it heats, it physically contracts, squeezing out the water vapor it soaked up overnight and releasing it into the sealed glass chamber around it. The outside of that glass is treated with a special radiative coating that keeps it slightly cooler than the air trapped inside, even under direct sun. So the released vapor hits that cooler surface and condenses straight into liquid droplets. The exact same principle as a cold glass of water sweating on a hot day. Those droplets roll down built-in channels molded into the base of the unit and collect as usable water in a small reservoir. Then the sun goes down, the gel cools back off, and the whole cycle resets and starts again. Every single day, powered by nothing more than the natural swing between night and day, a cycle the desert produces reliably whether or not there's a cloud in the sky or a drop of rain all year. And the testing backs it up. Over a week-long trial in Death Valley, one of the harshest testing grounds researchers could have chosen, humidity swung anywhere from 21% up to 88%, and the device kept producing water through the entire range, even on the driest days where fog nets, dew collectors, and some powered dehumidifiers had already stopped functioning entirely. Per unit, the output was small, somewhere between 2 and 5.5 fluid ounces a day, which on its own doesn't sound like much. That sounds modest until you realize the research team calculated that just 8 of these panels, wired together into a single array, could cover the full daily drinking needs of one adult. Scale that array up further, mount enough panels on a single structure, and you're looking at a system that could realistically supply an entire household with zero ongoing energy cost forever, as long as the sun keeps rising and setting the way it always has. Now, why haven't we solved water scarcity already with all the other tools available to us? Because almost every existing solution runs into the same wall, money and power. Big infrastructure, dams, reservoirs, desalination plants, all of it requires enormous upfront capital and a stable grid to run on, plus decades of maintenance and political stability to keep it functioning. That combination simply doesn't exist in most of the places where water stress is at its worst, which is exactly why the technology has never reached the people who need it most. And the crisis those places are dealing with isn't shrinking, it's accelerating. More than 2 billion people right now don't have consistent access to clean drinking water, and that shortage quietly kills over 1 million people every year, mostly through waterborne disease and the desperate measures people take to find a substitute. This isn't just a developing world problem either. Tens of millions of people in the United States alone deal with water insecurity today, and across an entire continent like Europe, a significant share of the population is affected by scarcity in one form or another. By the end of this decade, experts project global demand for groundwater will outstrip supply by nearly half. Farming and livestock alone account for the overwhelming majority of freshwater use worldwide. And as populations keep growing and industries keep expanding their thirst for water, that pressure is only going to intensify year after year. This is exactly the vacuum a device like MIT's is designed to fill. It doesn't need a reservoir. It doesn't need a grid connection. It doesn't need rainfall or fog rolling in off an ocean. And it doesn't need a maintenance contract or a technician on call. It just needs sunlight and a temperature swing between day and night. Two things the desert has in near infinite, completely free supply, every single day of the year, regardless of drought, regardless of politics, regardless of infrastructure. Right now, this is still very much a prototype, not something you can order online or pick up at a hardware store. But the team behind it isn't stopping at a proof of concept, and the direction they're heading in is arguably more exciting than the prototype itself. Their next steps are focused on refining the gel formula itself to squeeze out more water per panel and release moisture faster during that morning heating cycle, while also driving down the cost of manufacturing at scale. Since a device this simple should, in theory, become extremely cheap to produce once the material science is locked in, they're also working on linking multiple panels into a single vertical array, essentially stacking the same principle upward instead of spreading it out, which could push total output from a trickle measured in milliliters up into something measured in full liters per day, turning this from an emergency backup into genuine everyday infrastructure that a family could actually rely on. After that comes field testing in totally different climates, humid jungles, coastal towns, and other arid regions far from Death Valley, to see how the design holds up outside the controlled conditions of a single desert trial, and how durable the gel and the glass really are over years of exposure, not just a single week of testing. So if you're sitting somewhere off-grid right now hoping to build something like this yourself, the honest answer is you'll have to wait. This exact technology isn't commercially available yet, and the formulation of that hydrogel isn't something you can easily replicate in a garage. But that doesn't mean you're stuck with nothing in the meantime. If you happen to live somewhere with reliable coastal fog or consistently high humidity, fog nets remain a proven, field-tested option you can actually build today with materials from a hardware store. A simple mesh panel about 3 feet by 3 feet, strung between two posts at the right angle to the prevailing wind, can pull anywhere from 3/4 of a gallon to 2.5 gallons of water a day out of the right conditions. And materials for a basic DIY setup run under $100 total. No power required, virtually no moving parts, and the only maintenance is the occasional cleaning of the mesh itself to keep it from clogging with dust or salt buildup. It won't work in a true desert the way MIT's device can, but in the right climate, it's a genuinely reliable stopgap, while the newer technology makes its way toward the market. What MIT has really done here isn't just build a clever gadget, it's proven that dry desert air that every other passive system on Earth had already written off as unusable, actually holds enough moisture to sustain a person indefinitely if you know exactly how to pull it out and you're patient enough to let the sun do the work one slow cycle at a time. And once this scales, the implications go far beyond off-grid survival gear for hikers or preppers. This is a technology that could eventually put clean drinking water into the hands of communities that have never had reliable access to it, without a single power line, well, or truck delivery required, and without asking a government or a utility company for permission first. If you found this one interesting and you want to see more solutions for staying self-sufficient no matter where you live, go check out our video on the Zirpot, a Nigerian invention that's an off-grid fridge built from nothing but clay, sand, and water, and one that has genuinely saved thousands of lives without a single watt of electricity behind it. I'll see you in that one.